Okay, you ready? Last session, you're almost there. It's the fourth session. Still working? Yeah, still working. Don't know what that was. So fourth one is around having purpose, and this is where I think a lot of these ideas that we've been speaking about come together in terms of their manifestation, if you like, in the world. We have the tree of life analogy that we use, right? So this idea of the spiritual roots and the trunk being the kind of character formation, and the crown of the tree being how we are in the world in terms of educational excellence and changing the society that we find ourselves in. So there is something about having purpose which is quite universal. So here's a little video which I thought you'd like. What do you think of that video? Yeah. Anyone else? Go on. What are you thinking?
It's very sweet that he was held, but I think, sorry. No, I thought it was quite happy and gently. So, everyone stopped.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Here's Rush, yeah. Yeah.
Drivers that were stopped and the drivers that were carrying on.
Yeah.
Different respect.
Yeah. Good. Anyone else? It's interesting, isn't it? I was, yeah, go on.
I'm not entirely convinced they went any quicker.
Yeah. I was thinking that too, actually, when I saw that. And I was thinking about a slightly more cynical perspective. Like, you're obviously a really optimistic, kind of kind person. Whereas some of us, like cynics, are thinking, like, what exactly is driving him to, like, driving? What exactly is motivating him to, like, pick him up and walk across a zebra crossing? But look, there is... He could have dropped him. Lots of things could have happened. I was looking at a couple of different versions of this. But you see this, this idea, it's a really interesting psychological point, actually, that when we see somebody struggling, we feel like we want to help. Now, obviously, this guy may have tried to help because he thinks his job is on the line or something like that, right? But I mean, that's a different thing. And the reason why, then I was thinking about, it would be in China where they're promoting this type of behavior. So like, it's like a whole kind of, social experiment type thing going on here. But apart from all of the cynicism, there is something inside us, right? That when we see somebody struggling, either across the street or carrying something heavy or whatever it might be, that we want to help, right? We feel like there's a natural urge to help. Where does that come from? Evolution. Say more?
Well, we're a social species, are we not? It's part of our survival. The reason we're here, surely, is because through eons of history, humanity's grown, we have guided and supported and cared for each other. It's ingrained at our core.
Yeah. So this is the general response, right? So it's somehow, you use the word, really, really interesting word, encoded, right? But if you say to somebody, if I were to ask you the question, where is it encoded? How is it encoded? Like, tell me the gene where it's encoded. No, but it's really interesting. Like, there's this, because you see this type of behavior also in animals. Like, it's not just human beings. There is something innately within us that makes us more whole when we contribute. And it's interesting that all the academic studies around this notion actually point to this idea that when we help somebody else, guess who we benefit? Right? We feel better. So yeah, we might help the other person, sure. We're contributing to the world, sure. And there's a motive, and we'll do that with different motivations. Like we're reading into all the different types of motivations that may have been involved in this video. But when we're helping somebody, that also may have different motivations attached to it. Some higher in terms of level of consciousness, i.e. more selfless than others which are more selfish. And there's a whole spectrum there. But when we contribute to other people, we feel better. It's actually directly linked to well-being. Did you know that? You must know that, right? You've seen studies about this. Some of you have. I see some nods, some shakes. So like this idea that that's a proven thing, that we know that as you help other people, as you contribute to other, to society and the world and the people around you, you feel better. So part of our own well-being is actually, even if you take it from the most selfish perspective, or not the most selfish, but the a-selfish perspective, that, well, it's good for me and I'll feel better about it, let me help somebody else. Go around finding somebody to help. But even from that perspective, there's a benefit. What to speak of as it becomes increasingly selfless. And our ability and kind of capacity, which grows with that in terms of this notion of, actually, this is me in my fullness as opposed to just a part of me. And this is a really interesting slide here. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, this triangle in blue, which is, right, 1943. I think he came up with this in 1943. And on the left-hand side of it is from the Upanishads, which is at least 1,000 years before the Greeks. So what this tells us is that this is not a new thing. This is an inbuilt human thing, whether it's from the East or the West, whether it's thousands and thousands of years ago, or whether it's just in the middle of World War II. This thing is going on. There is a clear hierarchy in terms of what we as human beings need to be fulfilled. Okay? And at the bottom of that is this physiological. And sorry, for those of you who are not familiar, on the left-hand side of it, let me just talk you very quickly through that. Annamaya basically means that my consciousness is fixed on this idea of that I am nothing more than the chemicals that make me up, which has come from the food that I've eaten. Then I am nothing more than the life force. Then I'm nothing, I am the food and the life force. And then the Manomaya, the mind, my thoughts, my emotions make me up, included into that wholesome. And then there's this idea of a spiritual inclination. There's something going on. And then there's this highest point on the left-hand side triangle is my connection with transcendence, is the complete equivalent of self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy. Okay? But what it tells us is that at the top of this hierarchy of needs, in both versions, right, completely, well, who knows what Maslow was reading, but let's assume he came up with it himself. So in both versions, what does it tell you is at the top of that hierarchy? There is something much more deeper going on here than just the material stuff that we occupy our minds with. Therefore, this idea that we have something to, like, in order for us to become whole as human beings, for us to really become, as it says, self-actualized, this notion of being able to contribute, to connect, to be in this dynamic with myself, but also with something greater than me. It's a human need. And that's why, when we find ourselves on a mountaintop or in a vast forest or even at the ocean or whatever, this idea of looking up at the stars, right? This has been, this feeling that it arouses is not unique to me and you, right? This has been going on for thousands of years. This idea that I feel connected, I feel part of something greater. And for us to be able to, and when we shut that out of our lives, we're shutting out a big piece of what it means to be human. And when we shut that out of our education system, we're doing a disservice. Because surely, right, once we know that our education system should enable, empower our young graduates to take care of the bottom rungs of that triangle, that's not all we want for them in their life, right? We don't want them just to be able to contribute to the economy, which is 1 and 2, right? Or just to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, just to be able to put food on the table and a roof over your head. Fine, obviously, that's at the bottom end of that triangle, and you need to be able to do that. And hopefully your education will contribute to that. But that's not all education is about. And but how many of us, so we might be talking about kind of, as you go in the middle of this triangle, speaking more about some of the interventions and therapies and approaches that we do use to a limited degree in the education system. But what's going on near the top of the triangle, it's pretty absent. And so what we do in Avanti hopefully will be more than that. And this is a quote I really love from Nietzsche, from those of you who like Nietzsche. He had some really interesting things to say about many different things, but he who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. It's nice, isn't it? And that's the hard question, right? Like, the easier question is how. Why is a harder question. But once we can engage with that why, once I have a why to live for, once I have a purpose that's bigger than just me, then regardless of what I come across in my life, it's going to be easier for me to deal with. Because there's context, I can contextualize it. Okay? And this is obviously the question for this session. Figure it out. 30 seconds. Off you go. Speak to a partner. Yeah. Sorry? Oh, yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
Do I have to?
Oh, no, you know.
So when I was interviewed, Nitesh asked me this question, and it took me a little bit of time to come up with the answer. And he said, "No, that's fine. Take your time." I never ever have I been put in an interview situation where I was asked. I think you might have said higher purpose, but it doesn't matter. So I sat for a while, and I think I talked about this at Inset, didn't I, as well, with my team. And the question was, well, what did you answer? And it's quite personal, but what I did answer was that I've only been blessed with one child, and I've now been in education for 27 years, and I believe my greater purpose was to have a positive impact on as many children as possible.
There you go. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Sally. And yeah, we do. So watch out if you ever come back for an interview at Avanti. we have some nice tricky questions for you. But I remember the interview kind of process, like you were, and I remember Reese as well, like the similar kind of dynamic, right, that we had in the interview. And it was, I think with both of you felt like quite surprised, I would say, like by that process. And because it's not a question that we normally ask. It's not a question that we normally ask in interview, but but if you think about it rationally, as an employer, like what could be a more important question than that? Right? Like, why do you want to come work for us? Right? What's your purpose? And how many times have we asked this question to young people? Right? So how many times have we asked that to ourselves? So sometimes we might kind of let it sit with us for about 10 seconds and then it's on with the rest of the day. But in a serious, kind of contemplative way in which actually I'm going to find the answer to this way, most adults, I don't think, ask this question in a serious way. And then what to speak of the number of people who then follow it up with some kind of attempt to answer it through some process of reflection or whatever journey that they want to take towards that spiritual end. And but I think if we don't engage with this type of question, to talk about self-actualization, it's meaningless. It doesn't, you know, they become very tokenistic. Our talk about education really becoming the full flourishing of the human being and the self-actualization of the child, that's meaningless if we can't engage with questions like this. And so I think what I wanted to end with was just to say that, I had a really nice story, and I'll cut it short here, but there are many different ways that you can try and understand what honey tastes like, right? And a lot of talk that I hear about spiritual insight or the spiritual journey or self-actualization or greater purpose and all of these things, these phrases that get used, a lot of it is like licking the outside of that jar, right? I like the look of it. Looks really tasty. The lid's closed and I'm licking the outside and I'm thinking, what does this taste like? It must be really good. And I'm getting frustrated with the fact that I'm actually not experiencing anything here. I'm getting frustrated that the fact that our education system is not moving on and we're not seeing a different kind of change and spiritual transformation in these children and all the rest of it because we're licking the outside of the jar. Guess what you need to do? You need to open the jar, right? You need to open the jar and stick your finger in or something. But you need to, if we either we just take the line and we just accept that, look, this is nice talk and it's a nice theory and all the rest of it, and it belongs in its little box over there, or 5 minutes in the day when, whatever, right? So it has its place, but it's not really something that we're going to experience. Or we take the line that, no, actually, I'm going to open the jar and I'm going to see what it tastes like. And opening that jar is essentially saying, whatever that practice is for you, whatever that journey is for you in terms of your spiritual journey, that's opening the jar. That's not just going to fall out of the sky. You're not going to taste the honey through the glass. It just doesn't work like that. So when we talk about spiritual insight, often we talk about it purely from a theoretical perspective, or from the perspective of, yeah, it's good for the world, it's good for that person over there, and it's good for whatever, but I'm not going to do anything about it myself because either I have no time, or I have no interest, or I have no sense of its importance, or I have, etc., 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 right? So we can keep going with the excuses. And, but there are something like, I don't know the latest number, but there are something like 30,000 schools in the UK. Or maybe it's England and Wales, but let's say 30,000, right? 30,000. You could all be working for any of those schools, right? And that was the point of the questions that we were asking in the interview. You could actually be working for any organization. Why do you want to work for Avanti? So for us, the key thing is, we want people in Avanti who are willing to open the jar. If you just want to keep licking the outside of the bottle, 30,000 minus 12 schools out there, right? That you can go to any of them. No, that's not, I don't want to be disparaging about so many great schools out there, but you know what I mean. This is not an add-on in Avanti. This is absolutely front and center. This is core. This is what differentiates us from the rest of the education system. This is what we as an organization and a group of individuals are going to be absolutely focused and driving towards over the coming years. It's the very reason why I'm stepping down as CEO. It's the reason why James is coming in, and I'm going to be focusing my attention and my focus on developing the spiritual aspect of Avanti, because I feel, and I felt for about a year and a half now, that whilst we also talk about it in Avanti, and I felt, well, okay, what is the actual experience? What is the impact of this? What is the... Because you'd ask that question for everything else, right? You'd ask that question for everything else. Why would we not ask it in terms of spiritual insight? So just to say that I'm begging and pleading, please take from... If you're going to take anything from this morning session, please take from this that I'm really encouraging you to open the jar. And you can do that in whatever, this is, as you said right at the beginning of this is not a kind of like pushing you down a particular path here. This is just about saying, ask the harder questions, open the jar, understand for yourself and experiment and try different things if you don't already have a preferred practice. Like, what is it that works for you? Whether it's a faith or not a faith or whatever it might be. But there are 4 things that I'm interested in. One of them is around identity, and that journey supporting the uncovering of your essence. The second one I'm interested in is around how does that journey, how does that practice, how does whatever it is that you're doing raise your state of consciousness in a way that you can experience and keep it as raised as you can. The third one is around how does that practice help you kind of distance or buffer you from the materialistic pushes of the world and the world around you. And the fourth one is how does it connect you with a greater purpose, right? More than yourself, more than ourselves. And then once we as a community of schools get into this practice and get into this habit of doing that with ourselves, then I think the opportunity and potential of the impact that we will have on the young children in our schools is like without limit, truly without limit. And I think what will come as a consequence of that in terms of the type of students who we send out into the world will be literally world-changing. So I'm personally super excited about it. It's what, as hopefully you can tell by now, keep going on about it. I'm super excited about it, and I really hope that we as a collective can move in this direction. And like I said at the beginning, in response to your question, was that if there is anything that we can do as an institution, as a central team, trust level, if there's anything that we can do to facilitate those journeys, that we are absolutely on board with doing that. And I also know that our principals are likewise on board with supporting that. So thank you for being part of the journey so far. As I said, there's a long way to go, but it feels to me like we're really on a winner here. There's huge potential that I can think is palpable, but we all individually need to take part in that. Okay. All right. Thank you. And have we got some time for questions, or we have some time? Okay. So any questions or comments or any other contributions, doesn't have to be a question, you want to make, just put your hand up and the mic will come to you.
It's just a reflection how raising our consciousness helps us to set better intentions and navigate those intentions. Like, for example, there was a quote I read recently about a knife. You could have, a knife can be used to save somebody's life, but it can also be used to kill somebody. So, I know that's extreme, but still it's an intention. So what we're doing, are we doing it intentionally? So that's the reflection I had from the morning session.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I feel very happy at the time, like what you told me, I said this to my students. How would I transpire this? How would I make this in a child-friendly version, and how I could deliver this like that?
Yeah. And what age students do you teach?
Secondary.
Yeah, key stage 3?
3 and 4.
3, 4, yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, I think that's where I've done some of this with students. I mean, certainly with secondary students, dead easy, but like my wife's done it with primary students, and like, I don't think that there's anything that we've spoken about here that they can't engage with very, very easily with. So I think their interest in these areas, and that's what I mean a bit about us and our own journey, because our interest in it will transpose onto them. Like they take a lead from that, right? So, but yeah, with examples and with easy ways to access that. And there are some colleagues in the room who do this kind of as part of their routine. So yeah, I've seen it happen too many times to think that it can't happen.
No, I'm sure it can happen, but how do we then a part of our routine? The time constraints,
Yeah. But honestly, I think the first, I've got a couple. You want to respond to this? Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's the little things that count. So I explained how there was a student in detention the other day, somebody, and I pulled him out of detention. I said to him, "Look, what happened?" He told me what happened, and I said to him, "At the moment that you were doing that, did part of you question whether or not that was the right thing to be doing or not?" And he said, "Yeah, it did, sir." I said to him, "Okay, that's at the point that you should have listened to yourself." And so I think it's those little moments that bring this about. I don't think it has to be a sort of a session like this that's going to bring it into your practice. It's just those small conversations and those small references regularly that will start to bring about those change, will be my reflection on it.
Thank you. I really like this metaphor of the jar opening, and I could see myself in a classroom setting or in a staff room setting covered in honey, just blah. But I think that's weird.
I know, but so are you.
But I think make it absolutely explicit to them, like, step to one side and say, we're going to open the jar now. And then, that's a cue, isn't it? That's a prompt, as you were saying earlier. Once they've got that prompt, it's codified in their heads. They know now what we're talking about is that something more, the honey that's inside, as it were. That's where I see it going. That moment, Gary, you were talking about the detention. Right, let's open the jar here. Something simple, a maxim, if you will, that just ingrains it into their heads that, like, we're stepping out of the academia for a moment, we're stepping out of the routine of daily life, we're talking spirituality, we're talking, that's how I see it working for myself, I think.
Yeah, because I think these additional, like the bits outside of the curriculum and that direct teaching time are as important as what's going on in the curriculum. And a lot of what we're focusing now on also is the curriculum itself. So what are the specific aspects of our curriculum that make Avanti unique? And some of those areas, which will flow from primary to secondary, are about our practice around, our ability to engage with meditation, our ability to engage with even our personal development or PSHE curriculum. How is it specific to Avanti? And so there are the areas around discrete teaching time which we need to develop as a trust. We're on that journey, and then there's all of this aspect which is the ways of being and behavior and how the ethos comes alive in the time outside of that teaching time, which is which is going to contribute to the answer. But I don't also think it's going to be the same. Like I actually don't think it needs to be the same. In many respects, I think as long as it's true for the individual, i.e. it's true for the adult, they're coming from a place of not of hypocrisy, they actually practice what they preach type of stuff. If it's coming from that space, because it's important to them, it will manifest in that relationship with the children. Yeah, just the front. Oh, sorry, I'll come to you.
Thank you. For me, it's following the model of I do, we do, you do. And as I thought it was very interesting that you said the younger students find this easier to approach than the older students. So it may be that through time, our modelling enables this. So then the challenge is when students come in at sixth form, having to build in some really explicit modelling that can be much more rapid and effective for them.
Yeah, this is a really important point around, this is why we wanted all through provision wherever we have schools. We're battling with the lack of a sixth form in Leicester and the lack of a secondary in Redbridge, whereas in Harrow and Bishop Stortford in time, we'll have that all through provision, and the Southwest schools are limited in that sense also. So we're looking at how to address that. Because to your point, absolutely agree. Like that's been exactly our experience, that as they come in without going through the Avanti system, you're dealing with different issues. So now, Harrow's our most mature schools in terms of the number of graduates, and so therefore what we're seeing is now the number of kids coming into year 7 at the secondary, I think is about 80%, 90% of the kids coming into that year 7. So it's a completely different dynamic than we were taking kids straight into year 7, what to speak at sixth form. So in those areas, exactly as you said, it's really important to be even more explicit in terms of what it is that's defining us as an education institution, because there's they don't naturally have that kind of reference points. Yeah, Sally.
It's also more like the wider community. So, your stakeholders, your parents,
Right.
if we're taking them in at 3
Right.
in Meadows and Brook and they're going up all the way into 18 in Grange,
Right.
you're taking the parents on a journey, you're taking
Absolutely.
the whole community
Yeah.
on that journey, on the Avanti journey.
Yeah, and the Bishop Stortford scenario is a really interesting one, even more so because it's that whole, the two primary schools and the secondary were based on the premise of a new housing development. So literally, that was when we applied to that. That was, you're educating a community here because that's a new community. Everybody's new. It's not just, it's not just a school that's new. Everyone who's coming into that area is new, and it will take years for that to fully manifest, of course. But education is always a long-term game, isn't it? It's not what I thought when we started our first school. I thought it was like, yeah, we'll do it on the side, but how hard can it be to set up a school? And somebody said to me, it'll take you 10 years. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like 6 months. It should be up and running. Like after that, I've got a job I need to get on with. But education is the long-term thing. It's like you said, right? Building the cathedral. It is what it is, and that's why it's the most fundamental and most important kind of societal provision we have. Yeah.
It's just a reflection on today's session. What I found really amazing is that in all those aspects of spirituality, the common sort of theme was just stop, think, and go to basics, go to the very core of ask yourself, who am I? Because that will have an impact on our journey. Yeah. Then stop and think what raises your consciousness and build on that. Yeah. And I think it's so powerful not to overcomplicate, just to go back to basics and take it from there.
Yeah. No, thank you for that reflection. And it reminds me of a point that came up recently for me, which was, so I did, as I was saying before, I did a degree in chemistry, and when I was doing that degree, it was pharmacy related. So when I was doing that degree, I was like, I just wanted to get it over and done with. Like I absolutely hated studying it, and saw it as completely pointless. And my mind was always like into philosophy. That's the kind of area that I would love to have studied. But I was doing this chemistry thing, and it was like real pain. And only like more recently, as I've been reading more kind of philosophy and theology, that I've kind of come to understand that actually you can understand the deepest spiritual truths from anything, even from chemistry, if you go deep enough. But the problem is we don't go deep enough, and our education system doesn't go deep enough, not even at university level, what to speak at below that. And therefore, a lot of these things lose their relevance. Like, what's the point of it? That's how I was feeling. And if we can't latch onto the relevance bit of it, how do you engage a student? Because they have to see the relevance. And we talk about breadth and depth. And there is this thing about depth, which you can go into any particular subject or area or domain, and if you drill down deep enough, you get to some really foundational, fundamental, inspiring insights. But you can't get there if you skim at the surface. And for me, like, that's the analogy of the licking the outside of the jar. That's skimming the surface, like literally. So, for us to be able to experience more than that, and for ourselves and to be able to engage with the depth of it with students, is that, we need to be thinking about that. So, thank you. Okay, any last points, questions? Sorry, one more. Yeah, sorry.
I just really wanted to say the operational side of it's really interesting, like the how in the classroom. Yeah. But the main takeaway for me, I think, as educators, we're so quick to go to the children and the pupils and the students, but actually it's the permission that you've given us today to just sit with it ourselves as adults. Yeah. And if we get that part right, or we make some progress towards that, then almost by osmosis the rest will follow. Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you for that opportunity to be reminded as an adult, because I'm more lost, I think, now than the 5-year-olds that I teach that are following their instincts and their guts. And as a 46-year-old, I don't stand at the front of the classroom and know who I am. So just having that permission.
Thank you. This is a really important point, and it's one I'm at pains to kind of like drive home to all of our staff. There's that Greek, what was it? It says, "Physician, heal thyself." That's the start. Like when we say like physician heal thyself, like there's this. You know, is it Socrates? Oh, right, okay, yeah. I knew it was one of them. But, but you know, like this idea of, I think about it in a theology perspective. I've often observed that one of the reasons why people turn away so much from religion, institutional, organized religion, is hypocrisy. They see hypocrisy. And when they see hypocrisy, it's like, I don't want anything to do with that. You know, and hypocrisy, like, it's not just the religious institutions who are practicing hypocrisy. Like, we all as individuals sometimes do that. Like, we say something that we're not willing to do ourselves. And I caught myself doing that, you know, like when I was, you know, telling my children to do something. And as a 3-year-old will kind of like respond to you, like, you know, there have no barriers around kind of like pointing out the truth. And it does make us think. And I think, and that's my main point. I don't know what's up with that, but that's to keep you awake. Because it could sense you falling asleep at the droning sound of my voice, coming to the end of the session, waiting for lunch, wake up. So I will close. I take that as a sign to close. But yeah, please, I'm really glad you ended with that point, because as I was saying, if there's one thing you want to take away from here, please do take that point away. Open the jar. This is not just for somebody else. This is for each one of us. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.